Welcome to this special edition of Shaka Extra Time. We are talking about the significance of the USA elections. So many people have turned out to vote, and as we speak right now, all the presidential candidates have voted. Their vice presidents have voted. So we are waiting to see what happens later on tonight. Give us a feel of what's been going on since morning.
First of all, I have to say that I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to be on your show today, the Shaka Extra Time. Having said that, you pointed out that a lot of people have come out to vote. Are you surprised by that? We're talking about an election history here. Whichever way it goes to Hillary Clinton, guess what? She becomes the first female president of the United States of America. She breaks the almighty ceiling that she talks about that prevents women from getting it all. If it becomes Donald Trump, mighty billionaire Trump, it becomes another type of history. This is a man that has never even elected for being perhaps a district attorney, not a state attorney, not a state legislature. He's never been on Capitol Hill as a senator or a congressman. He has never been or held elective office. He is an outsider, as he says. He has obviously very, very deep pockets, and that's probably why he's there. But in fact, if he gets the key to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House, he makes history as the first outsider to have done it.
What makes this election particularly important? When you talk to people, there's a lot of excitement on both sides of the aisle. What makes this election special?
For supporters of the incumbent president, Barack Obama happens to be one of the most popular presidents in modern history. In his second term, he should be, in fact, a lame duck president. Well, we're talking about a guy who is pretty much in the 50s when it comes to approval in terms of public opinion polls. You know as well as I do that the United States is not the kind of country where he can shift the constitutional political goalpost in order to run for what some people call a third term, or a third term. So if Hillary gets the nod, it's almost like having the moral equivalent of Barack Obama's third term. And that would obviously send the message that you get more of the same. On the other hand, if you look at Donald Trump, he is an outsider. He's a guy who says that Washington is corrupt. You need change. In fact, he's talking about the same kind of concept that young Barack Obama came up with back in 2008. He talked about the need for trajectory change. So he would in fact be bringing about trajectory change in the sense that the American voter would have in fact cast a vote of no confidence in the American traditional political establishment, in that they would in fact have given a nod to an outsider. That's why it is very interesting.
We usually talk about the third term in the context of looking at African politics. This is where leaders stay on, and when they're told their time is up, they say, oh, I still want the third term. But in this particular case, it couldn't be further from the truth. When you see Hillary Clinton is pretty much doing the third term thing. How different is that from an African election?
Well, first of all, you can't make that kind of generalization of saying from an African election. Because frankly, at least the last time I checked, in my own biased counting, and I happen to be biased in favor of the truth, by the way, Paul, I cannot count for you more than 10 African countries out of the 54 member countries of the African Union, which in fact hold what you call an election. They basically hold what some people characterize as selections, because you have incumbent presidents who have made a decision that you do not lose an election that you organize and hold. And so it would be very unfair for us, for example, to compare, frankly, an American election with an African election. Maybe we should just look at maybe a specific African country and look at the United States. But having said that, The United States, no matter what you may think about it, it in fact holds an election. It holds an election that is not conducted, by the way, by the federal government. It's not conducted by Washington, except for the election for the District of Columbia, which is conducted obviously in Washington, D.C. The United States does not organize, does not hold elections. These elections are organized and held and conducted by individual states. So each state actually organizes an election, in which case, frankly, when you think about the chances of rigging it, are almost next to zero, really. The margin of error is almost nowhere. And the last time I checked, Paul, there are more Republican governors in the United States than there are Democratic Party governors. So in which case, if in fact any party were to have a chance of rigging an election, it would have to be the other way around. It would have to be the Republican Party, because they control the majority of the states, as opposed to the Democratic Party candidates.
But there was a precedent that was set back in 2000, Al Gore versus Bush, where it came down to Florida. A lot of people to this day still think that that was a rigged election.
Well, there are people who say that it was a rigged election, but a rigged election in what sense? It's not like they went and actually did a revote or voted again. No. I remember they counted those charges and what have you. And eventually, what happened? It was the Supreme Court of the United States that jumped in and invoked its constitutional right and decided on the basis of 5-4 in favor of George W. Bush. That's how he became a president. The only confusion there, of course, especially when if you come from Africa, is that the man who came in second, Al Gore, he actually won the majority vote, if you will, the popular vote. But he did not win the almighty Electoral College vote. Because we're talking here about Electoral College. It is the one that chooses the President of the United States. It's not the people who simply cast the vote and therefore you have a total in your favor. But that has not happened many times, frankly, in recent, modern American history. Having said that, you need the magic number of 270. And from what I have seen so far, that electoral college and the manner in which politics played, around the country recently, it seems to favor the Democratic Party candidate. Because you are talking about the largest state of California, which holds the majority electoral college votes of 55. By the way, electoral college votes pretty much reflect the constitutional, the congressional districts or constituencies in each state. You do have 53 Congress persons from the state of California, and you have 2 senators. So 53 plus 2, you get 55. And that is in favor of Hillary Clinton. You go to New York. New York has 29 electoral college votes. And she is the favorite, obviously, to take that state. She used to be a state senator from New York.
Even though both of them are from New York.
That is true. But again, when you talk about the registered voters poll in the state of New York, it is hugely in favor of Democratic Party voters, registered voters. So that is the reason why she enjoys, obviously, an advantage there. And you go to Illinois, the state of the incumbent President Barack Obama. You're talking about 20 electoral college votes. So when you even just put those 3 major states, which are not in play, she already has, in fact, a third working towards the magic number. But when you talk about Trump, you're talking about Montana, 3 electoral college votes. You're talking about Alaska, 3 electoral college votes. You're talking, there are so many small states that you need so much. That is why, for example, he needs Florida. Not only Florida, he will need North Carolina. Florida is 29 votes. North Carolina is, I think, is about 15 electoral college votes.
Correct.
Then you need also Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, I think we are talking about 18 electoral college votes. You need Ohio. You need Ohio. In fact, he might even need Iowa. He might even need Wisconsin or Michigan, for that matter. So for him to win, it will take really almost beyond midnight. But for Hillary Clinton, if she captures Florida, for example, that makes it very difficult for Trump to win because he only has one path, or probably two.
But it's not impossible because other presidents have done it. Bush did it 2 times.
No, I'm not saying it is impossible. Rather, I am saying it is very difficult.
All right.
Because there is only one way or two ways for Trump to get to the magic number. Whereas for Hillary Clinton, there are several ways, several paths. And I have already told you, she begins with a significant advantage, with a third in the bag. These states are not in contest.
Right.
They're not in contention, really. You have not heard about anybody talk about California.
No.
You have not heard anybody mention anything about New York, Illinois, and there are several states that I can talk about that will probably bring her in the neighborhood of probably 3/4 of electoral votes. Whereas with Trump, even if you put together Alaska and all these other so many states where Republicans are favored, he will probably come in the neighborhood of 209 electoral votes. So he will still need a lot. In order for him to win, he must invade the Democratic Party territory and get, for example, states like Minnesota, which usually go Democratic. He must get places like Michigan. He must get states like Wisconsin and probably Colorado, Nevada, and all that kind of stuff. And it's not that very easy.
Yeah. Shaka, when you talk about U.S. elections, a lot of people don't understand the Electoral College as opposed to universal suffrage, where in most countries people use universal suffrage where the winner takes all, or you have to win like 50+1. But in this particular case, it really doesn't matter whether you have the popular vote, most people voted for you, as long as if you don't have that magic number, the 270, the Electoral College. Could you maybe please explain to our viewers and listeners what that all means?
Well, I have already, in a way, really talked about it, how the election is won through electoral colleges. And I have said you need a magic number of 270 in order to be the next occupant of the White House. How does an electoral college come about? First and foremost, it is chosen by different political parties. So in this particular case, really, we're talking about the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And then the second phase, the people who actually go to vote. And when they vote, then obviously later, after they have voted, those members that have been chosen as the Electoral College electors are the ones who are going to endorse the winner of the presidential election by, of course, voting in favor of somebody until somebody gets 270. Although it is also understood, by the way, that being a member of the Electoral College, you are not necessarily committed. You might, in fact, want to, you could actually, in theory, you could vote for someone else, but it normally doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then there is, of course, another way of becoming a president. You have not asked me about what happens if, for example, there is a tie. Because, in fact, there could be a tie, meaning each candidate gets 269. 269 plus, if you add them together, you get 538. That is a combination of members of Congress and the 100 senators. And so what happens? Guess what? It goes to Capitol Hill. The House of Representatives decides who becomes the next president.
So it could be Trump, president.
It could be Trump, but again, look at it this way. It doesn't have necessarily to be one of those people, in fact, who have been running for office. They could decide to choose someone else outside of the two individuals.
Interesting. So, Shaka, there is a lot of excitement when it comes to U.S. politics, U.S. elections, especially on the African continent. A lot of people are excited. People stay up all night. I remember when I was there, I used to stay up all night waiting for results. And to this day, people are still doing the same. As I speak, we have so many media crews from Africa, different African countries covering this election. Why is there so much excitement, especially when it comes to the presidency, covering the U.S. elections?
I think there is a lot of fascination generally with the United States of America. It probably begins with Hollywood. the movies really, about cinema, films and all that kind of stuff. Then you can talk about music. You talk about, people like Michael Jackson. You talk about all great musicians that we have either read about or had the opportunity even to attend their concerts and stuff like that. There's a lot of fascination about the United States. It also happens to be, by the way, a land that is very lucky in the sense that its daughters and sons have invented a lot of things, frankly, that have, contributed to universal languages. I can talk about electricity. Thomas Edison, invented the electric bulb. I mean, when you see electricity all over the world, you're talking about the United States. Alexander Graham Bell, when you talk about the telephone, you're talking about the United States. So there are so many things that characterize the United
Twitter.
Facebook, Twitter, you name it.
YouTube.
Exactly. Now, you talk about even television, as a matter of fact.
Computers, internet.
You name it. And so, when you talk about people going to the moon, outer space, and what have you, you're talking about the United States. So it's a land of fascination. But when it comes to democracy, especially, frankly, this is a land, when you think about it, in 1776, which probably was the first country ruled or colonized by the mighty British Empire that defied the British, fought and struggled for political independence. And General George Washington, a man, of course, who a lot of people wanted him to be a king. And he said, no, he only served, I think, 2 terms and went home. This is a very interesting country in the sense that for many, many years, it has had claim to moral authority or political moral authority in the sense that you don't have to be born into privilege here. You can be born into very humble beginnings. You work your way up and you become a king occupying the most political address, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, as president of the most powerful country in the United States. Not to mention, frankly, it is the only remaining superpower so far. You get that? And so it makes sense when Africans really even spend, in fact, their nights up waiting for a presidential debate because they want to know what is happening in America. It fascinates them and they learn something from it. Now, the problem is this election that is ending today, it could actually cause problems.
Why so?
Well, because, for example, Trump has been talking about language that is very familiar in African countries. He's talking about a possible rigged election, a rigged system. Now, when you do that, you give ammunition to African dictators or undemocratic leaders or rulers, because then they say, wait a minute, it's not only us anyway, after all, who are accused for doing that. Why should we listen to Washington when, in fact, even Washington itself can do a little bit of, quote-unquote, creating accounting? So I think there's going to be a problem. But the United States is an incredibly fascinating country. So to be very honest with you, I am not surprised that Africans, and indeed around the globe, people are fascinated by what is happening or not happening here today.
Speaking of that, let's go to comments. Let's start with Muhumza Charles in Rwanda. He says voting for Hillary is like bringing a Clinton for the second time. That one family will have ruled Americans for 16 years, not 8 years. This means America will be like Africa, where leaders or dictators rule forever.
Very interesting, but you know, he doesn't make reference to the fact that he comes from a land where one individual, Major General Paul Kagame, not only is he probably going to be in power for more than a generation, even though he's not a king, but he has had at least the opportunity of changing the constitution and saying it is the people that have decided that he should be, in fact, eligible for presidency in the next 34 years. I don't think there is a problem with Hillary being president. Hillary is a wife of Bill Clinton. They are two individuals. Each of them has a vote, as a matter of fact, and each of them, I think, has the opportunity to be the best that they can be. It is up to the American people, if they, in fact, decide that Hillary deserves to be their president, they are the ones that make the choice. I don't see any contradiction there.
Let's go to Andrew Chimbwe in Zambia. Hillary Clinton is best suited for the presidency, looking at the massive experience she has. Donald Trump's foul mouth would not only divide the United States, but would rather create more enemies and deepen wars with other countries. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he has a point. Of course, everybody, Paul, I have often said that is entitled to their different opinions, but certainly not their different sets of facts. You have a situation here where yours truly, Shaka Ssali, I did not give a chance to candidate Donald Trump, even during the Republican primaries. Sincerely, I did not think that I could see this man being the Republican flag bearer. And I have to swallow my pride.
So I should have taken you on a bet. You refused to take me on a bet.
Yes. In fact, I could have bought you whatever you wanted, whether it was dinner or
okay,
what.
the bet is still on.
Well, we'll talk about that. So what I'm trying to say is that he is an enigma. He's somebody, frankly, you cannot predict. For some strange reason, he has been able to draw traction. He has been able to resonate with a significant segment of American society. He gives a voice to that segment, which gives the impression that, or at least has perhaps demonstrated that it has no voice, that there has been a sort of disconnect with the Washington Republican establishment. There has been a disconnect between those people, the elite in the Republican Party, and the ordinary people that have supported them all the time. And in Donald Trump, they find a new prince. So if this man can make it, it is not really because people were looking for experience. It is because people were looking for somebody that gives them a voice that they have not had for a very long time. And he has talked about the plight, for example, of the white-collar white man, the white rural men, the ones that used to work in factories in Detroit, in Pittsburgh, in Ohio, in Wisconsin, and what have you. He has given them a voice. These are people who don't have jobs because of NAFTA, which was put into place during the Clinton administration, essentially helped factories to go to Mexico, where American, of course, businessmen, industrialists, take advantage of cheap labor, produce goods and bring them here and make a kill. And so these people have been sort of economically displaced, and they're looking for a savior. And they think that multi-billionaire Donald Trump could be their man.
Speaking of that, there is another comment coming in from Alfred Shako in DRC, rather from DRC. He says, Donald Trump, because he's fighting the establishment, be it a political, environmental, media, economical, or whatever heck that could be, he is telling Americans every truth they have never heard before. He's telling African Americans, even real Africans and African leaders, what they really need to know, and they should be and how they should behave. He's going to be the president of the world, and he's expecting America to be treated as a superpower. Do you agree?
Very interesting. I think I agree with some of the things that he puts across. But I should also say that whoever becomes president of the United States tomorrow, he will do the same thing that every other United States president has done, which is promoting America's national interests. And others might say America's vital national security interests. What am I talking about? Paul, when I was growing up and I was young, in the 60s and in the 70s, there used to be a saying that what is good for General Motors is good for America. You know what? Nothing much has changed. What is good for American corporations is good for America. That is what the president will be making sure that continues to happen.
You can even add that what is good for the goose is good
good
for the gander. Let's go to Nigeria. Vincent Atuma, in Nigeria, says Trump is a brutal capitalist. He has insulted Africans and African Americans, and he is arrogant and disrespectful, lacking the temperament and character. I prefer Clinton. She is a seasoned public administrator. She's charismatic, and she has the right qualities and mindset for the White House. Your thoughts?
Very interesting. Of course, Clinton is much more sophisticated politically. There's no question about it. Clinton is not. He's a man who speaks his mind. But he has a mind also, frankly, that at least has the ability and the capability of making money, at least for himself and his family. But let's face it, for that particular individual, I would like to recommend a book for him. And the book I would like to recommend for him is called Decade of Death, Secret Wars and the Genocide in Africa, 1993 to 2003. After that person reads that book, then we can have a conversation. Because then he might see, in fact, the other side of anybody other than Trump being president of the United States of America. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, what is important for the president of the United States of America is for that individual to promote what they call America's national interests. And what are those interests? They are largely economic. So it is about diamonds under the African soil, gold, coltan, which makes cell phones and what have you. And in fact, 80% of coltan comes from a country called the Democratic Republic of Congo. 80% of the known coltan reserves. And guess what? When you go to that part of the Congo, the eastern DRC, which is not very far from my birthplace, Kabale, in southwestern Uganda, you would think that those people do not even live in a society whose economy is based on sweet potatoes.
Interesting. Now let's cross over. Since you talked about Kabale, let's cross over to Uganda. We have Yusuf, Kajimu Yusuf in Uganda, who he further says that as far as he's concerned, their foreign policy towards Africa is not going to change.
Well, first of all, I think there are so many people that will agree with him that they don't actually find either Hillary or Trump very attractive or inspiring in terms of, frankly, even voting for them. In fact, I have been told by some African diaspora, especially from Ethiopia, who told me that they are not going to vote for Hillary Clinton, someone that they would almost automatically have voted for. And the reason they gave me is because of foreign policy. They said that beginning with her husband, Bill Clinton, who came up with this coinage of the beacon of hope for African democracy, a new breed of African leaders. And he was referring to Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea, Meles Zenawe of Ethiopia, rest in peace, of course, he died several years ago. He was also referring to Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, Paul Kagame of the Republic of Rwanda. These people will say that, in fact, he should have sincerely said they are a new breed of African dictatorship, not a new breed of African, leaders, because they are not beacons of hope for African democracy, because in fact they may be right. The last time I checked, from Asmara through Addis Ababa to, through Kampala and Kigali, do they hold elections? Well, they say that they hold periodic elections, at least Rwanda, Uganda, and Ethiopia. Eritrea does not even pretend, doesn't even try. But are the others, are they in fact called elections? No, they're called selections by a lot of people, because in fact those elections are organized by those particular individuals who make sure that they are the ones who win them, because in fact they organize them. So they even think that Hillary Clinton will not be any different. After all, she was Secretary of State under President Barack Obama. She didn't seem to make any difference. So they're not expecting anything different from what happened under the watch of her husband, or even what happened under the watch of the incumbent president, Barack Obama, even though his father is a son of the African soil from Kogero. But a man who has actually twice from the African soil said some words that are so contemptuous of some of these African leaders who claim to be democratic and yet they are not, hang on to power. So I think that at the end of the day, what Africans need to know, the single most important obligation of any American president, no matter who they are, it is to promote American national interests so that their people can get jobs, they can get, they can enjoy life, liberty, and what? And guess what? The pursuit
of happiness. On that note, Shaka, we are running out of time. Very quickly, what are you talking about tomorrow on Straight Talk Africa?
Tomorrow, Paul, we are talking obviously about nothing other than the elections, the U.S. elections themselves. We'll be talking about, of course, the results. We'll be looking at who won the election and why.
Any predictions?
I think that if you look at everything, frankly, that you and I have been able to see, it looks like it would be an election, frankly, that is for Hillary Rodham Clinton to lose. In other words, she should really have closed the deal. In fact, there are a lot of people who said if it was Bernie Sanders, who she beat during the Democratic Party primaries, if he was the candidate, by now he would have already closed the deal.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Shaka.
Yes, but don't be surprised if there is a political miracle. Anything can happen.
Well, we'll watch, keep watching, and hopefully things get better, like you like to say, not bitter for Americans. And on that note, thank you so much. For those of you who are watching us, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And until next time, bye and so long from Washington.